Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Holiday greetings, everyone. This is Marty Kaiser with our Friday edition of Real Estate Tidbits. Hope everyone is doing well and enjoying the holidays. Hard to believe we got Christmas coming up in a few days, and then before we know it, we'll be in 2026. I'm going to go over three different topics today. First thing we'll do is just do a quick summary of where we're at with sports. Sports is always very busy during the latter part of the year. So last night we had a really big NFL game. It was a battle between the two teams with the best records in what they call the National Football Conference, the NFC. The Rams played against Seattle. Both teams came in with, I believe they were both 11-3 going into the game. And the game was at Seattle. The Rams had won the first time they played a few weeks back in Los Angeles. The Rams were up by a healthy amount in the fourth quarter, but Seattle came back and won in overtime. They got a 2-point conversion in overtime to win the game by 1 point. A very exciting finish. So it puts Seattle in the driver's seat for best record in the NFC. Why best record's important is the team with the best record gets a first-round bye in the playoffs. So that enables them to rest their players, especially guys that are nicked up or injured. So it should be interesting to see, but it's far from over because it's only a one-game lead. In the NBA basketball, the Emirates in-season basketball tournament came to an end. Very good game. The New York Knicks upset the Oklahoma City Thunder. And so those were two of the teams that were predicted to possibly be in the NBA Finals this year. The Thunder, it's been assumed, is going to roll everybody. They came into the game against the Knicks with only one loss. I believe they had something like, a 24-1 record, which is phenomenal. But the Knicks beat them, so props to the Knicks. Should be interesting to follow both teams. So that's all for sports right now. The college bowl games are in full swing. You'll see a ton of them over the next 10 days. And then you have, I believe you have the college playoffs starting this weekend. So follow that. That should be exciting. This year, the playoffs were expanded to 12 teams. The two pre-playoff favorites right now are two Big Ten teams, Ohio State and Indiana. Indiana was ranked number 1 and Ohio State number 2 in the end of the season. So that should be interesting to see how that shakes out. The second thing I'm going to go over is going to be a little bit of a continuation of last week's podcast. Some more tangible information about where the housing market and real estate are headed in 2026. Today's discussion will be less statistical based and more conceptual. Basically, my concept is going to be what can consumers, which we define as buyers, sellers, and renters, expect in 2026. Well, as I've mentioned previously, interest rates have gone down slightly and we're expected to continue to go down slightly in 2026. But we don't see anything dramatic that's going to change in that. The days of the 3% interest rates, I think, for the foreseeable future are going to be non-existent. One of the things that's interesting still is inventory supply. Now, this is on a national basis that I'm quoting you some of this, but inventory supply pre-pandemic, meaning before 2020, is still down about 17%. Now, obviously, certain markets have more inventory and other markets have less inventory, but on a national basis, supply is still not caught up with pre-pandemic levels. So that's one of the reasons why we're kind of in a balanced market in the sense that the prices have flattened out, but because the inventory is still below average, it's helped the prices not go down because we had those record couple years in 2022 and 23 where prices were greatly inflated. So right now it's still expected that on a national basis, prices are going to stay pretty flat. So we'll have to keep a close eye on that. Basically, the market is pretty level. Myself, as well as a lot of the experts that I value their opinions, don't feel that it's tilting in either direction. You know, what is clear is that individual markets in terms of some cities are stronger than others, and within the cities, it's very neighborhood specific. So for example, you might live in a neighborhood that is stronger, and then you might go 1 or 2 miles down the road and find out that a neighborhood is weaker. So for both buyers and sellers, that's an important data point to analyze and have your realtor give you more tangible information, meaning that you might want to be in a particular zip code and or in a particular school district, but possibly you might find that as a seller, your neighborhood might be stronger or weaker than something down the road, which would obviously affect your pricing on your house. By the same token, if you're a purchaser, you might be able to find a lower priced home in the same general area. So as the purchaser, you have to determine how important it is to be in neighborhood A versus possibly purchasing in a nearby neighborhood that is a different neighborhood, in the sense that it might not have been your number one focus, but it might have enough positive virtues that you're willing to sacrifice the name of the neighborhood to get more house for your money. So that's an individual decision by a potential purchaser, and that's going to be up to you in discussion with your agent to determine which option works out better for you. Now, one of the things I was interested in reading about, which correlates a lot to what I've told my customers, but it's always good to see if anything's changed, is from the financial experts. And this relates more to first-time purchasers, because obviously as prices have gone up significantly, it's made it a little bit more challenging for first-time purchasers to get into their first home. So one of the things that the financial experts encourage people that are renting to do is to try to reduce your monthly payment obligations. And so what does that mean? Well, basically, that means trying to curtail larger purchases and also paying down your credit cards. Obviously, some people have more or less disposable income than others, but the better you can position your debts, it's going to enable you to have an easier time with a mortgage lender in terms of getting a stronger pre-approval, and it would increase your purchasing power, because one of the things that lenders analyze is how much debt do you have that is a monthly obligation. And one of the things the financial experts encourage, in addition to what I've just said, is when you're paying down your credit card debts, is to first focus in on your high interest debt. So you may have some credit cards that have differing interest rates. And so as you may know, there's some interest rates that people don't always realize that the interest rate might be over 20%, which is crazy. But it's not uncommon for most interest rates of credit cards to be in double digits, meaning 10% or more. And those things can dramatically hurt your purchasing power. So the financial experts feel that as much as possible, you should aim at paying down any credit cards that have balances of 10% or more. That's a rule of thumb. So if you're not sure what your interest rates are on various credit cards that you utilize, you should go in and look at it. On the bottom of each bill that you get, it'll tell you what the APR or the interest rate is. And that's very important, and to try to positioning you better. Now, one of the encouraging things for first-time buyers is Fannie Mae, which is one of the government lending agencies, They've recently removed the long-standing minimum credit score benchmark. So it's going to give them more flexibility in looking at a borrower's total portfolio. Obviously, your credit has to be, sufficient, but they can have more contributing factors to it. They don't have a hard and fast rule now that if your interest rate, let's say, is not at least 630, that you're automatically not going to qualify. So that's a good thing. For a lot of first-time purchasers and renters, the biggest hurdle is still upfront cost, and that's defined as a down payment and closing cost. Now, sometimes you might qualify, depending on what county you're in, for down payment assistance, depending on your income and whether your county is offering down payment assistance. And then there's some loans, like a VA loan, for example, if you're a veteran, that enables you to incorporate some of your closing costs into your mortgage. So that's another way to help you with reducing your out-of-pocket at closing. The third way, which is a negotiating strategy, which is trying to negotiate where the seller will help you out with your closing costs. And that's perfectly legal. And a lot of times we can juggle numbers. So in other words, we can maybe have you pay a little bit more on the purchase price, but then have the seller contribute even more on the closing cost portion. So it's really just trying to come up with a scenario and strategy that's going to best enable you to get over the first-time hurdle. Because once you're into your first home, it's always much easier down the road to buy your second home. So kind of the point of this exercise is not only doing the analysis to see what you're able to do and not do, but to have a plan. You may meet with an agent, let's say, in January of this year, and it may take you, based on what you, the realtor, and the lender come up with, maybe it'll take you 6 to 12 months to be in a better position to do that. So you always want to be proactive. And these consultations and recommendations do not cost you anything. And it's beneficial to you and the realtor and the lender, because if you're comfortable putting together that team, when you're ready to make the move and you've positioned yourself optimally, it's going to be a much smoother experience for the three of you, and it's going to be a much more successful experience. And so that's everybody's job, is to help you achieve your goals and objectives in a most efficient fashion and minimizing the stress. The other thing that comes into play when you're analyzing your financial position is cash reserves, not only for your own peace of mind, but also what a lot of the lenders require is they may require 3 to 6 months worth of expenses and savings. And that could be a big difference for you. Now, one exercise that some of these wealth planners have recommended is for you to try to set aside a full month's housing payment. So meaning when, let's say you borrow hypothetically, let's say you borrow $300,000 from the lender, and let's just say your principal and interest payment for that $300,000 maybe is $1,900. Well, then you want to add on to that your taxes, your insurance, and your homeowner's fees, assuming you're buying in a homeowner's community. So let's just say that money, for discussion purposes, totals $2,400 or $2,500. By putting away that money, that would give you confidence that that's something that's doable for you. And this is independent of what the lender says. Obviously, the lender has their own criteria to underwrite you, but you first want to be comfortable with the payment, because the one thing you don't want to do is being house poor. And you may see that for the type of house that you're looking for, you may need to either put away more money in savings, or your income may need to improve, meaning that you may need to get a position that has more income, and maybe it's because you get higher responsibility, or you look to switch employers to a company that may compensate you more generously. But these are all things, the quicker you can do those things, the better it's going to position you to buy a home. And what we call income alignment always plays a role. Again, the financial planners that I'm explaining to you, they recommend as a rough planning tool that you multiply a monthly payment you feel comfortable with by about 2.25 to estimate the gross income that you may need to support it. Of course, after that, you still have to adjust for car payments and other ongoing debts. This is not a lender formula, but it's more of a gut check to see your comfort level. So, for example, we'll use that illustration I gave you, $2,400 a month payment. And so if you multiply that by 2.25, that comes out to around $5,400 or $5,500 a month. So from your comfort level, notwithstanding your other debts, that's kind of a starting point for you. And obviously there's other factors that are going to determine what you're actually qualified for. But for example, if you're not making that amount of money, then probably that payment is a little bit above not only where you're going to be comfortable at, but what the lender is going to approve you for. So this is what I call proactive financial planning, and it's all very beneficial to you, and it'll really give you a much greater insight into what your particular situation is. Now, the rental market, believe it or not, it's a little bit more favorable to renters. It's not going to change what I would call astronomically, but you've seen a little bit of a decline in many rents. And so rents for the time being, especially in markets that have had a lot of construction over the past few years, is going to be a little bit more affordable for tenants. So that's a good thing. Not only will you be able to feel more comfortable with the payment and get a better selection of apartment or housing options, but you'll also be able to live with a little bit less stress in your situation. So that's another thing to consider. So that's a little bit more about the real estate insights. Hopefully that's given you a better idea as to some of the things that we do to help you get in the best position possible and educate yourself. So I'm going to take kind of a big left-hand turn here and kind of going off the reservation a little bit. And I go over this about once or twice a year. It's the end of the year, so we're all counting our blessings, hoping that our families are in good health and doing well, and looking forward to a healthy and prosperous 2026. So what I'm going to go over now is a little bit about our society, violence, and guns. Some of you may have heard me go over some of these topics, but we've had a number of mass shootings recently within the last month or less. We had the recent tragedies at Brown University. We had the professor at MIT that got shot. We had a very unusual mass tragedy in Australia. And those are just to name a few. And basically, this puts it into kind of perspective for me. When I was doing some research on shootings, it's hard to believe, but mass shootings continue to outnumber the days in the United States. So meaning that regardless of what year we've covered over the past 10, 15 years, we have 365 days in the year, and the mass shootings in the United States continue to exceed 365 days. So that means that we have more than one mass shooting each day on average. As of last week in the United States, so far in 2025, we had 391 mass shootings. So that streak about going over the 365 level It's continued for, that was the 7th consecutive year. And the mass shootings that I mentioned about in Australia were religious based, unfortunately. They were anti-Semitic. They were based on the first night of Hanukkah in a gathering that takes place frequently in Australia. Interestingly, and I know some gun advocates would say, see, it doesn't matter that you ban guns. Look what Australia had. Well, Australia, these were really the first mass shootings in 29 years in Australia. They normally have on average 0 to 1 year, and a mass shooting can be defined as 2 or more, and this one in Australia was quite larger than that. But Australia had a big mass shooting in the mid-1990s, and their government was very proactive and pretty much banned guns. And they've had almost no gun violence since then. And the countries such as Australia, which are the UK, Japan, and Canada, they have similarly strict gun laws and extremely low rates of mass shootings. But in the United States, we've continued to have a mass shooting epidemic. And sadly, one of the statistics is firearm deaths are the leading cause of death for children in the United States. And that's, those are deaths that could be avoided. The problem with guns in our country is far from isolated. And I think we all agree and know that we're never going to ban guns in the United States, regardless of what your position is on guns. The Second Amendment is a very popular amendment in our Constitution, and so we're always going to have guns. However, conversely, a large majority of Americans back such measures as universal background checks, restrictions on high-capacity magazines, and mandatory waiting periods. Why aren't we doing these things? We're not doing these things, in my opinion, for 3 reasons. Number one, the National Association, the NRA, they have a lot of influence on our gun policies. A lot of the politicians are scared to oppose them. A lot of the politicians get huge donations from them. And they come out with a lot of false narratives and information. And that's unfortunate, because you can have common sense things that don't impact people's ability to own weapons. Do you know that in the United States, we have more weapons than population, meaning that if our population's 100 million, for example, we have 125,000 guns. So there's plenty of guns going around. But there's no reason why we don't make it a little bit more thorough about checking people's backgrounds, because a lot of people own guns that shouldn't own them. They've got mental problems, they've got records of different things, and they're an accident or a murder waiting to happen. High-capacity magazines like your AK-11s and the different weapons like that, there's no reason to allow those. Regardless of what people say, it's not an intrusion on your gun rights, but those weapons are used at war. They're killing machines. And for example, people say, well, you need long guns for hunting. Well, it's universally agreed to that if you use that type of weapon to hunt an animal, you will tear the animal to smithereens, and it won't be suitable for you to eat. So there's absolutely no reason to have those type of guns. It's really strictly a money issue, because the more guns that are allowed, the more guns that are sold, and it's all about money in the United States. For example, we had a recent incident that was on the news in Lake County, which is an adjacent county to Orange County, about 2 or 2.5 weeks ago. A middle-aged man around 55 years old went down to a bus stop carrying an AR-11. He had it in plain sight, was carrying it, and it went on the news. And when he was questioned about it, he said, well, we have open carry in Florida. I have every right to carry that gun. There's nothing the police can do about it. And believe it or not, he was right. We do have open carry. He wasn't doing anything illegal, so there was nothing the police could do about it. However, from doing additional research and talking to some people in law enforcement that I know, there's usually two reasons that people like that gentleman carry an automatic weapon in public sight. Number one, they want to intimidate people. So think about that. Is that a healthy person that you want owning an automatic weapon that likes carrying a gun so he can intimidate people? And number two, the other reason is they're hoping to generate a lawsuit and make money. And what do I mean by that? Well, in the states that have had open carry longer than Florida, a lot of these people go out and do the similar activities, and they're trying to bait the police into doing things that they're not supposed to do when it comes to an open carry state. And then if the police are exceeding what the law says, then they're trying to start lawsuits against the police department and the local jurisdiction. It's strictly a way to raise money. But think about the logic of it. Why would anybody want or need to carry that type of weapon in public? There's absolutely no reason for it. It just makes people very uncomfortable. How would you like to have your child at a bus stop with somebody carrying an automatic weapon while your child's waiting for a bus? In fact, they had one parent that was interviewed about this with that particular incident. And he said, so does that mean that every parent should now carry a gun when they take their kid to the bus stop? That's what that kind of behavior encourages. Open carry, in my opinion, is a grave mistake. I don't care what your logic is about guns, but the more people that carry guns on their person 24/7, the more shootings you're going to have. It doesn't discourage shootings. There's no statistic that shows that discouraging. It just makes it easier for people that have mental problems, or maybe they're inebriated, they have temper issues, or a variety of reasons. It just makes it easier for them to use their gun. If you believe in the Second Amendment and you believe in people having the ability to protect themselves and their family, which I totally understand, why do you need to carry it on the street? There's no reason to do that, absolutely none. For the few times that it may prove beneficial to you, the times that it proves to be a killing weapon is going to far exceed that. And unfortunately, our politicians, I don't think necessarily believe in these laws, but it's for their own self-interest because it's about money and getting reelected. And the pro-gun advocates to the extreme have done an effective job in framing this and making it sound like if you want some common sense controls over guns, that you're against the rights of people to own guns, and that's simply not true. So anyway, I just wanted to leave the end of the year with that. I hope that somehow we get common sense in our society and we try to put some constraints on this. I don't feel very comfortable with that because I'm not giving you a new argument. We had the Brady Bill in effect for a number of years after Ronald Reagan they attempted to assassinate him in the late 1970s, in the early 1980s. And it was effective at reducing a lot of the gun violence we had. But that law ran out, and during George Bush's administration in the early 2000s, they didn't reenact that. And our shootings have been on an upward trend ever since. So that's all for today. Everybody have a healthy, prosperous, and healthy 2026. If you're going to be participating in New Year's Eve celebrations, be careful and alert. And if you're going to drink, don't drive. And that's all for today. This is Marty Kaiser out.